Hello, and welcome to episode 12 of Sarastro's Star Wars Shatterpoint painting series. In this video I'll be painting Sabine Wren from the Star Wars Shatterpoint miniatures game by Atomic Mass Games. As usual, you can see that I've primed the figure in black, followed with some grey and white zenithal highlights applied from above. I've also chosen to paint her off the base, simply because I decided to paint the bases separately with the airbrush to save time. I'm starting by painting the face, where I'm first using some white sands to place the whites of the eyes. We don't need to be super accurate here, as we'll be trimming these back in a moment. I'm now using black to paint the surrounding area, adjusting the size and shape of the eyes as I go. And I'm also placing the pupils with a small vertical stroke through each one. I sometimes find myself going back and forth a little with the two colours until I'm happy. For Sabine's skin, I've chosen to use golden flesh mixed with a little orange for the main colour, which I'll first be darkening with some burnt Sienna Umber for the shadow tone, and I'll be adding some vanilla white and a touch of yellow for the highlights. So here I'm mixing some golden flesh and a little orange into the burnt Sienna Umber to create my base colour or shadow tone. There's also some exposed skin on the arms. I'm now adding increasing amounts of the golden flesh and orange to begin building up the highlights. For this area beneath the cheekbones, I often like to use the paint more thinly, and pull the pigments down to create a gentle gradient towards the jawline. I also like to try to get a little light in the area just above the eye. This is now the pure golden flesh and orange mix. I might still go back and forth between the highlight and shadow tones. Here I've added some primary red to create a more reddish tone for the lips, followed with a light pinkish tone to highlight the lower lip. I'm now using the burnt Sienna Umber to carefully draw on the eyebrows, followed with some refining with the surrounding skin tone. For the brighter highlights, I'm now adding some vanilla white along with a touch of yellow. Here I'm just blending some of the transitions with a thinned, slightly darker tone. This is my brightest highlight tone. Next I'm providing some black lining where the hair meets the face. And I'm now going to paint the orange section of hair using a mix of Mars orange and brown leather. For the rest, I'm using violet mixed with a touch of black. We can create a bit of a jagged transition between the two colours. I'm now highlighting the orange section, firstly up to pure Mars orange from the base tone. And I'm adding some Sol Yellow for the brighter highlights. I'm now using pure violet to highlight the purple section. And I'm lightening this with a little Arctic Blue. Here I'm just pushing for a slightly richer tone in the shadows beneath the cheekbones. Moving on to Sabine's top, I'm going to warm up some Graphene Gray with a little Walnut and darken it down slightly with a touch of black. This is the tone I'm using for the darker sections of the top. I also want to darken down the gaps in the armour. I'm also using this for the elbow and knee straps, the gloves and the boots. For the lighter part of the top, I'm using Graphite, once again mixed with a hint of Walnut. I've also chosen to add a touch of black to create a darker tone, allowing me to create a little light and shade as I go. I'm using the darker tone for the shadowed area at the back. I'm now returning to the Graphene Gray mixed with Walnut to add a few quick highlights to the dark parts of the outfit. And here I've lightened things a little further with the addition of some white sands, mainly to help articulate the fingers. Next we need to create 3 different shades of slightly desaturated brown. For the light part of the trousers, I'm using Thar Brown mixed with some Gobi Brown, and any light tan colour would be fine for this. For the rest of the trousers, I'm using an equal mix of Arabic Shadow and Walnut, desaturated with a little graphite. And for the belt and holsters, I'm using Walnut mixed with Dubai Brown, darkened and desaturated with a touch of black. I also decided to add a careful bit of black lining to help separate the elements. I'm now adding a few quick highlights to all of these brown areas by adding a little white sands and perhaps a little Iroko to the respective base tones. I didn't feel the need to push these highlights too far, as it's the coloured armour and paint splatter that's going to draw the eye the most once the model is finished. Next I'm going to prepare some black, white and Prussian blue on the palette. I'm first using this to mix a pale off-white, which I'm then going to use to paint the various pieces of armour. This is to provide a strong undercoat to allow the colours we'll be adding in a moment to appear nice and bright. I'm now mixing a darker grey for the metal detailing on the belt, as well as for the blasters. And here I'm finishing the rest of the armour. Next I'm going to freely mix some purple, magenta and red, which we can then use to paint the armour plating. Because I'm continually mixing the colours quite freely, I'd expect there to be some natural variations in hue. We want to apply this with some little stipples and scratches, leaving a rough edge where the paint has worn off. The right knee, on the other hand, has a vertical white stripe running down the centre. For the right half of the chest piece, we want to create 2 white stripes at a bit of an angle. For the left half of the chest, I'm mixing a light orange tone using a mix of orange and intense yellow. I'm applying this in a couple of layers to achieve maximum saturation. I'm then using the magenta tone to draw a circle in the upper right to form the basis of the rebel symbol. If If any of these lines turn out too thick, we can trim them back with the orange. I'm now going to approximate the shape of the symbol inside the circle. We can then add some concentric rings outside of the main symbol, alternating between the two colours to tidy things up if needed. And if you want the orange to be a little more opaque for this, we can mix in a little white. This doesn't have to be immaculately neat to still look fine from a tabletop distance. Next I'm mixing some additional white into the orange and I'm colouring the left shoulder, once again leaving the edges nice and ragged. I'm then using some dark brown ochre to draw on the wolf's head motif. I first plotted out the main geometry of the design with some little dots. I'm now placing the nose, then basically joining the dots. This is the tongue. I'm now mixing a light pinkish tone with a little orange mixed in to provide the colour. For the right shoulder pad, I'm first using a darkish grey to draw on a simple grid pattern. I'm then filling in alternate squares to create the checkered design. Ideally, we'd want to expand the little white squares so their corners actually meet, but even my patience has limits, and this looks good enough for me. To finish the shoulder off, we can add a pale grey filter to create a nicely worn and faded appearance. We just need the paint to be well thinned, and we can freely push it around and add a little texture as we go. With the armour complete, I'm now picking out the pale grey sections of the blasters. I'm also adding some of the coloured detailing, such as this yellow strip. And for the other blaster, I'm using primary blue mixed with a touch of black. We can then add a few highlights. And I'm also using some cool off-white to highlight the metallic details on the belt. Next I'm adding the paint splatter to the boots and gloves using permanent orange, pastel violet, and a mix of turquoise blue and sky blue. Moving on to the explosion, I'm taking the same approach that I did for the rocket blasts in the earlier episodes. So I'm first using some pure white to provide an undercoat for all of the fiery recesses. Once dry, we can then use whatever fiery fluorescent tones you like on top. I'm freely mixing a few different coloured pigments from Hera models to create a little variety. I'm then overbrushing a dark grey on top, leaving the glowing fiery tones in the recesses. And here I'm going in with a smaller brush to continue painting the smoke, adding some fragmented textures as I go. We can then build up some highlights to increase the sense of volume. And I'm using a bluish grayscale to paint the debris, once again with a mix of black, white and Prussian blue. Once done, I'm gluing Sabine to the base before adding 1 or 2 final highlights. And I chose to add a few additional pieces of debris to the ground. And this completes Sabine Wren. Thank you so much for joining me. I do hope you've enjoyed the episode. As always, you can find full paint and product lists in the video description, along with links to all of the places I can be found on social media. My sincerest thanks go to my amazing patrons for funding this work. If you'd like to support what I do, feel free to hit the Patreon link and pledge what you can. Join me again soon as we continue painting miniatures from Star Wars Shatterpoint. Happy painting!